Good morning, welcome back to Full Scottish, a weekly look at Scottish news, politics and sport. Glad to have you with us. This week we are welcoming guests Tom Arthur, Renfrewshire South MSP, and Katee Kross, musician. We'll be talking about a new cross-party group on Holyrood, on music, and we'll be looking at Brexit, because it's a rule that every week political programmes have to look at Brexit, and we'll also be basking in the glory of Scotland's win in the rugby yesterday. So, without further ado, let's go on with the show. Hi, good morning. Big warm welcome to our guests again, Tom Arthur, Renfrewshire South MSP, Katee Kross, musician, and we will be starting the show by looking at your stories of the week or the day. Katee, what's making you, what's piquing your interest today?
So obviously, of course, my story of the day is Scotland beating England yesterday at the rugby and winning the Calcutta Cup for the first time in a decade, I believe.
Yeah.
And also, I believe that the First Minister was in the dressing room full time, having a wee drink of champagne out of the cup. I'm not sure if she was drinking out of the cup or out of a glass, but it always seems like a good environment. It always seems like a really fun time. So I hope to make one of the games. Papers are full of it this morning. Got a lovely wrapper and cover on Scotland Sunday. You can see that there, but it's a pretty special, great picture by Ian Rutherford of PA. So yeah, it's a cause for celebration, Tom. I mean, it's a rare cause for celebration in terms of sport, the sporting world.
Absolutely, and I think it's the fact that these kind of successes are often so rare, have been certainly in recent years for Scotland, that we really know how to appreciate them, even the First Minister it seems as well. But it was absolutely a fantastic result, and I think it's one that not just the score itself, but the actual performance, the passion, the energy, the flair, the creativity. I can imagine it. I think already the sort of commemorative DVD box will be getting designed for it.
Indeed. And J.K. Rowling was in the audience. Is that an audience in a sporting event? I'm not a sporting guy. In the crowd. So yeah. So no greater compliment could somebody pay than J.K. Rowling come to watch it. Yeah. But in terms of the national psyche, what importance do you place on these big sporting events, Katee?
I think it always helps to make everyone feel a bit, I don't know, more Scottish, or feel proud to be Scottish if you do have the win. I enjoyed the game. I thought it was a good game. I don't really know much about rugby. My brother plays rugby, and funny enough, I had my 21st birthday party on Friday in a rugby club. So there's a wee link there.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great game.
It's rare for Scotland to win. The more common story for Scotland's sporting events are we are come so close, and for whatever reason we fail.
No, absolutely, and I think it's glorious failure is perhaps what we've turned it into an art form. And often kind of our greatest results are often wrapped up in ultimate failure. 67 defeating England 3-2 at Wembley at football, but not actually qualifying for the European Championships. The dubious honour, I think, have been the first and perhaps the only team to be ejected from a World Cup without losing a game in 74. The hysteria of 78, not that I can remember, perhaps you can.
I can remember, thank you for pointing that out. Yeah.
But the hysteria there and the disappointment that followed afterwards, certainly for me growing up, my first experiences were Euro 96, and obviously the bitter disappointment there. And I think again it wasn't just the way in which we lost. It was a goal, I think, at Patrick Kluivert's out through David Seaman's legs kind of late on in the game. If England had won by 4 clear goals, and we always end up in these dubious situations where having to win by so many clear goals and hoping for results to go our way elsewhere. It's certainly it gets me to the stage now that I almost don't want to watch, because it's and Andy Murray sort of embodies this battling. You just don't know whether it's going to happen or not. And at the end of it, I think spectators or crowds or audiences feel more exhausted than some of the players do. Absolutely. It's such an emotional roller coaster. So it's great to see this result, and it's great that maybe we're not being so successful with our football team or our rugby teams out there flying the flag proudly for us, and actually giving people of my generation and younger generations the opportunity to see a Scottish national team do well at the highest level, and not have to sort of ask one's parents or grandparents about glory days of years gone by.
Exactly. I mean, spent a lot of days in newsrooms waiting for Andy Murray to win an event that we could then justify putting a poster in the newspaper or a wraparound cover and it not happening. So I feel quite jealous of those people who were working yesterday and they eventually get to do a rugby wraparound cover as they did in Scotland on Sundays. So great news, absolutely. Yeah. Tom, your story of the week?
Well, it's not a sporting one, unless one counts politics as a sport, but for me, and I portray my sort of partisan colours as an MSP, but it was the passing of the Scottish budget this week. My colleague Bruce Crawford, in speaking in that debate, who's also convener of the Finance Committee in the Scottish Parliament, described it, if I remember correctly, as a historic budget, because for the first time we're seeing a real opening up and divergence between income tax arrangements in Scotland and the rest of the UK. And that's ultimately what devolution's always been about. It's been about allowing that variation to occur and for parliaments to respond more effectively to the needs of the people. And in this, I think, the 20th anniversary of the the Scotland Act being legislated for back in 1998, it's great to see that the Scottish Parliament is continuing to mature and continue to develop these new powers. And I think as that process goes on, the argument for more powers to come to the Scottish Parliament will become increasingly irresistible.
Do you think that there was a kind of psychological barrier to people having to pay more tax in Scotland, certainly in Scotland, than in England potentially, and indeed, although most people aren't paying more tax, they're paying more tax than they are in England?
Well, you're absolutely right to say most people aren't paying more tax. Indeed, 70% of taxpayers, everyone earning under £33,000 is paying less, and indeed people on £26,000 and under are paying less than what they would be if they were living in England. So the reality is that it's actually a relatively small proportion of the Scottish population have been asked to pay a little bit more, which is ultimately to offset cuts that have come as a consequence of the UK Tory government's decisions, who are reducing the Scottish Resource Block grant by some £500 million over the next 2 years, and that's the money that pays things like doctors and nurses and the day-to-day running of public services. So this is an opportunity. What this is Scotland taking a different path. And to the point you make about any psychological barriers for raising taxes, it has become something of a dogma and political orthodoxy that parties shouldn't really raise taxes, but the reality is that there's examples elsewhere in Europe where there's higher marginal tax rates, but they have dynamic industrious economies with world-leading industries centred there, and that often tend to be more inclusive, more equal societies where people are genuinely, at least by UN measurements, demonstrably happier.
Mm-hmm. Katee, you come from a generation, clearly a different generation than I am of. Is tax something that your people of your age are particularly worried about or concerned about?
I think so. Probably, most likely. I done my first tax return this year.
Did you?
Yes, exciting stuff.
I bet it was, yes.
So that was quite an experience. My dad sit me down, going through everything, and it also almost felt, you were taking part in something. You were giving back something to the NHS, to everything else that the tax goes towards. So I did feel good about it when I did do my tax return, but I think people are worried about it, but you need to pay for it to get your services.
To get the services, absolutely. Although one of the criticisms that has been hurled at the SNP government is that this isn't going to improve services, it's going to improve things that the Green Party are more concerned about.
Not at all. This will improve a range of public services, but one of the key things that it does is it mitigates and offsets the cuts from London, and the reality is, for as long as we have a constitutional arrangement where macroeconomic levers and the vast majority of taxpayers still reside in London, there will be an element of what we do in the Scottish Parliament is about mitigation. And I can say that as an MSP, I find that terribly frustrating. I would much rather we were being proactive rather than having to go and clean up the mess created elsewhere. But in saying that, I'm glad that we do have these powers there and we can take these actions. Otherwise, we would be facing hundreds of millions of pounds of cuts, and that's not something abstract. Often when politicians speak about figures like hundreds of millions, it's difficult to relate to what that actually quantifies to, but the figure, for example, to maintain tax parity with the rest of the UK, as proposed by the Tories, it equates to thousands upon thousands of nurses being cut, or huge amounts of investment in the education system being withdrawn, or in other areas. So the fact that we have these powers there, it's correct that we're using them, and it's to be welcomed that we Green Party have worked in a spirit of collaboration and constructively. And I think there's other parties can learn lessons from that approach, which is that in a parliament of minorities, which was what the Scottish Parliament was ultimately envisaged as being, it's incumbent upon all political parties to step up the plate, to show maturity, and to engage constructively with the government. And the Green Party, in doing that, have managed to secure funding for areas that are of interest to them, and collaboratively there's a budget being passed that will benefit my constituents in Renfrewshire South and all of Scotland.
Which is, I suppose, how budgets were supposed to work in Holyrood,
Absolutely.
because it was designed to be a parliament of consensus rather than...
Absolutely.
So, yeah. Okay. We're going to move on just now to talk about the Tom's cross-party group on music. But before we do that, Katie, do you want to start?
Yes.
Get ready to sing one of your songs. I shall plug your new single, which is called Bluebird, which is available now. Enjoy it again, and we'll have a discussion about the Scottish music scene, and in particular the new cross-party group, Tom, that you set up to look at music. Why did you feel that this was necessary?
Well, I should declare an interest. Before I was elected as an MSP, I was involved in music myself. I was a musician. I performed, I taught piano freelance. I had did a couple of degrees in music at the University of Glasgow and had been planning to go on and do a PhD in musicology. So from education, both in receipt of it and taken to teach and in performing, and particularly all of the kind of areas that we maybe not have to think, we don't normally think about musicians having to do with performing. So you have to effectively, if you're a self-employed musician or running your own business, you become your own agent, your own tour manager, your own promoter, your own accountant, you know, your own marketing. You end up having to develop this whole range of skills. And what I, having had that lived experience of being a musician and come into politics, I felt perhaps there wasn't a depth of understanding amongst policymakers that I would have hoped for or expected. So in putting together the cross-party group, I wanted to create a platform, a forum, to give a voice to musicians right across Scotland and all involved within the music sector, where we would have that opportunity to engage directly with MSPs and policymakers, to work collaboratively, and most importantly to help push music up the agenda, to help explain the immense contribution music makes across Scottish society, and to actually be in a position to take some action to enhance the terms and the conditions of musicians, and to really make sure we're supporting Scotland's music sector all the way.
Katee, you've been playing live music in Scotland now for how long?
Since I was 16,
okay.
So I'm 21 now.
Okay. Is it getting harder?
It's getting harder to find venues that want to pay you to play. It's mostly come to our venue, play for exposure, and maybe get some more work out of it later on. Most of the time it turns out you go, you play, you do your bit, and you get nothing from it. So it is a bit difficult like that. But there is tons of different venues out there that do support live music and up-and-coming acts. So I guess it's hard for everyone because venues still have to pay bills, but you tend to feel a wee bit used sometimes.
I guess it's like unpaid internships, etc.
Yeah.
So the idea is that you sort of invest a bit of your time and you get something back.
Yeah.
But in your experience, the getting something back part of that bargain isn't always fulfilled.
Yeah, sometimes it doesn't get held up. Other times it does. I mean, there's loads of venues out there that are supportive, but most of the time you go in, you do your bit, and you don't really hear much from it ever again. And there's also some venues that, you know, there's a term pay to play, so you have to sell a percentage of tickets before you get to play, but the tickets are maybe £7.50 and you only get £2.50 off the £7.50, and the rest goes back to the venue, which is fair enough because they do have bills to pay. But I think if it was an equal split, you would maybe get more musicians wanting to do it, as opposed to they're doing all the hard work selling the tickets and they're not getting much back from it.
Is this politically, are the politicians that are in the cross-party group, what's the general view on musical unpaid internships, gigs that you don't get paid for in the hope that you'll stumble upon success?
I think the circumstances that Katee's just brilliantly outlined speak to the way in which the experiences of musicians can inform broader political debates. Now, ultimately, you think, just to have Richard Wood's expression, almost like unpaid internships. It's effectively unpaid trial shifts. Now, a colleague of mine at Westminster, Stuart MacDonald MP, has recently introduced a private members' bill seeking to tackle the issue of unpaid trial shifts, where people can be in perhaps working in hospitality or restaurants or bars and being asked to work potentially 40 hours a week with a vague promise that maybe there may or may not be a job at the end of it, and nothing materialises. So it's simply exploitation. Now, this is something that's been going on in music for a long, long time. The Musicians Union have got a fantastic campaign, Work Not Play. The reality is, and the sad reality is, it's become almost standardised and normalised, where musicians are expected to go and to give up their time to work for free, generating a profit for a venue, providing entertainment, creating an atmosphere and ambience, and not to receive anything for it. In fact, just to be grateful for the opportunity to play. And any musician who perhaps actually goes and says, no, this is my craft, this is my skill, I deserve to be paid for this the way anyone else would be, nor regarded as being awkward or difficult or unrealistic. That's something that has to change, and it's great that we're now having the Fair Work agenda has the prominence as it does has, but also this is an opportunity in rolling back the tide of these exploitative practices. We have to go much further and get rid of them in music altogether. Musicians deserve to be paid just as any other practitioner does, and we have to have that cultural change, because if we don't, we risk a situation where the broader economy starts to resemble the reality for many musicians, which is unpaid trial shifts, low paid work, insecure work, and often being treated very poorly by agents and venues, etc., become standardised right across the entire economy. When we speak about the kind of rise of the precariat and the gig economy, which is effectively just insecure, unpredictable work. That's been the norm for most musicians for a very long time, and we've got to make sure that that doesn't become the norm for the wider economy, and indeed that we roll that back within music itself.
Because Scotland's built up a reputation, and particularly Glasgow was built up a reputation for live music and having a thriving music scene. Is that as true today as it was?
It definitely isn't. There's a really thriving music scene for open mics and kind of free events, but it's definitely a part of people will pay if they have to sell 30 tickets. They will make sure they pay those 30 tickets, even if no one buys the tickets. They'll take it out of their own pocket just for that wee tagline of they've played such and such. Of course, I'm not going to say anyone because I quite like playing venues.
Yes, you don't really want to start criticising them individually. Yes.
No, but I do think it's a very thriving community of people, and we do all look out for each other. The main thing, if you are a musician and you're working and it's your living, the best thing to do is be part of the musicians' union, because it's the best way to be covered in certain situations.
One of the problems I think maybe the Working Party group is going to look at is the risk to venues, in that very many venues are having to close now because developers might be putting up property next to them, and the people that move into that property don't like the noise.
Yeah, absolutely. I was delighted a couple of weeks ago to see the Scottish Government confirm that they're going to introduce the agent of change principle. And what this will mean is that when property developers erect new residential properties next to venues, it's their responsibility, it's incumbent upon them to ensure that their residential accommodations that they've put up are suitably insulated and soundproofed. We can't, because the situation where these venues can be erected and then weeks and months later there's complaints going because of an established music venue is completely inequitable and totally unfair. So that's great to see that's going to be introduced by the Scottish Government, and it's been a great campaign that the MU have run, and it's also fantastic to see that it's going to be introduced elsewhere in the UK. The UK Government's already said that they'll introduce it, I think, in England and Wales. So that's very positive, and it's just an example of how when musicians work together through the MU and engaging with politicians of all parties, we can actually see that material change, because the reality is it's not just an issue for musicians, it's an issue for the consumers of music. And if people, venues are, are incubators for the next generation of talent. And if there's an opportunity there to go and hone your craft and skill and to build up an audience and a following, then we will start to see a poverty and dearth of future talent coming through. So it benefits Agent of Change, and benefits not just the venues themselves who get to stay, but it benefits musicians and it benefits audiences.
Katee, you had, I suppose, a rather unique experience in that you came to the attention of C6 Steve.
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit about that? What happened,
yeah.
And how did it come about that he learned of your music?
Basically, he released a new album. I quite liked the track off of it, so I thought, well, I'll just cover that and put it on my YouTube channel. I don't know how they got hold of the YouTube video itself. It was a cover of Purple Shadows. It got emailed to C6 Steve's wife, who then showed it to C6 Steve himself. They were doing a one-off show down in London to celebrate 10 years of his first album being released, because he's solely independent. He doesn't have a record label, he doesn't have any kind of deal whatsoever. He just releases them himself, totally 100% independent, which is fantastic for him. So he got in contact with us, asked if we wanted to take part in this show, and we said, yeah, of course, definitely. And then he mentioned it was going to be in Wembley Arena in front of 12,500 people.
Gulp.
Yes. It was, of course, I'll do it, I'll definitely do it. And it was, I think he got in contact with us 6 days before the event. So it was a case of, you just need to go and do it. You just need to go and do it. We got...
Well, you had 6 days notice before you learned you're doing it and actually doing it.
And actually doing it.
Okay.
We got a flight down. He paid for that. He paid for a hotel room. We got our dinner paid for us as well. He brings his own kitchen with him, his own chefs and things. So it was a full 3-course meal we got before the show. And then I got my 3 minutes on stage to sing Purple Shadows in front of 12,500 people, which was
how did that feel?
Fantastic, absolutely amazing, the best feeling in the world. I thought it was just going to be, all the lights are out and it's just going to be a big black hole and I won't see anyone. That's what I kept telling myself on the flight. I'll be fine, I won't see anyone. But he had like light bulbs kind of dangling through the whole venue, so it was like chains of lights, which meant you could see the silhouettes of everyone sitting, and you could see absolutely everyone standing, like every face in the crowd. At the time I walked on and I was like, oh no, I can see everyone, but it was better because you saw everyone's reaction, and I was a wee bit worried that they weren't going to take to me, because they were just like, just off the stage.
To see somebody else,
They've paid to see C6 Steve, they don't want to see some wee lassie from Bishopbriggs, do they? But they loved me, they really, really did. And then the spin-off from that was last year he came to Kelvin Grove Bandstand, and he got in contact with us again, said, we don't have a support act, will you come support me? Which was amazing because it's in my home city. I got a 45-minute set this time instead of 3 minutes, and a lot of great opportunities have came from that. So I'm really, really thankful to C6 Steve because he's opened up so many doors for me, and it's a great opportunity that not many people get.
Absolutely.
And it's always good to have that tagline at the end of your name, played Wembley Arena or the bandstand. Or
a great thing to remember.
And a great thing to remember. It was just, from start to finish, it was a fantastic experience. He wasn't someone who just, you know, invites you into Wembley Arena and then goes, I'm going to my dressing room, leave me alone. He spent the whole day with me. He came into, I shared a dressing room with his female band members, and he came in and sat down and had a chat with me for the whole time I was there. He never left me alone, made sure I was really comfortable. And he's just such a great, down-to-earth guy.
Fantastic.
Just a normal guy.
Good story.
Yeah,
good story.
It is.
Why though? Why should politicians get involved in music? Why should they meddle in music?
I think it's one of these, sometimes when I'm asked that question I have to take a moment, because it's just, as a musician, it just seems so obvious and axiomatic. I think there's two broad areas. One is just, I would say, is just intrinsic, the value of music. Music is a good thing. And at times I wish we could just stop there and just argue that it's a good thing. People enjoy music, they enjoy consuming music, they enjoy playing music, and you can have fantastic, for people who go on and pursue music as a career, you have these amazing opportunities like Katee just outlined there. But for many people it can be going and playing a session at a pub, it can be music making in the home, it can be just the fact that you're engaged in actually learning about music enhances your appreciation of music, and so in itself it is just a good, it's a public good, and it's something that should be encouraged just in its end. But I appreciate in terms of policymakers have to give a bit more than that. So the broader case is the sort of utility, or the instrumental case, if you pardon the pun, is about what other benefits it brings. So it makes a huge contribution to the economy. Music tourism is huge in Scotland. We have some fantastic festivals and events, and they draw people in from across the UK and much further afield as well, so that generates revenue. We have a fantastic music scene here in Glasgow, and a array of fantastic clubs covering every range and style and genre. Again, brilliant for the economy, brilliant for the scene, brilliant for culture in the city. Culturally, it's a huge positive for Scotland. I think it was the Lorient Festival last year or 2 years ago. It was a huge success, and we have all these new festivals and events emerging, which really put Scotland on the map. Another area is around education. It has a tremendous impact. Music education is something that I'm very passionate about. It's certainly something that the Cross Party Group is going to be looking at in detail. We're really fortunate to have a range of excellent organisations involved, with Music Education Partnership Group chaired by John Wallace, the heads of instrumental teaching as well are represented on it, and many others. In music education, when you learn to play a musical instrument, you're not just learning how to play a musical instrument. You're learning about you're improving your rhythmic skills, your physicality, your socialisation, your emotional development, your capacities for communication. In a sense, but there isn't any standard subject within the sort of school curriculum where music cannot benefit. And indeed there are cases, for example, where music used as a targeted intervention can actually have really positive impacts in reducing the attainment gap. For example, there's research suggesting that children by the time they get to 5 years old, from the most and the least deprived backgrounds, can have a significant difference in the number of words they know, the vocabulary gap or the word gap. Targeted musical interventions from those children who are a bit further behind, because it increases your capacities for discerning things orally, for identifying sounds, etc., and the socialisation engagement that goes on, can actually help to reduce that gap. So across a range of different metrics and measures, it makes a positive contribution. And certainly what I want to do, as long as I'm an MSP, and hope this cross-party group can do as well, is to really make these many reasons much clearer to policymakers, and to push music much further up the agenda, and to make sure that we're looking to secure the funding necessary to make sure everyone has an opportunity to succeed in music, and more broadly just to be continually making that case for the intrinsic value of music in itself as a good thing, and I think it can enrich people's lives in many ways.
What do musicians, Katee, like yourself, look for from politicians? Is it just money, or?
No, I think we look for security, to be helped, to not be exploited. It's not always about money. I think that just having some policies there that will cover us, because Musicians Union do a great job, but just having the policies there would be good. For example, I know it's going back to money, but if you didn't take as much money off people for tickets, then it would probably be better. You would get more people going in doing the gigs. But also, even just, there's so many venues and open mics throughout Glasgow that help to encourage, especially younger people. There's lots of what are called all ages open mics, which run, there's a few running in Glasgow and today as well, and it allows young people to go in and have the secure environment to go and express themselves, and maybe encourage them to do it for a longer period of time.
In Scotland, most of the money for music and indeed the whole arts is funneled through Creative Scotland, and we've seen recently some criticism of their decision-making process, I suppose would be accurate to say. Clearly, an organisation charged with giving money to artists is going to have to say yes to some artists and no to more. Is there any way that an organisation, Tom, you'll know politically, is there any way an organisation like that can ever escape criticism?
I think when you're having to say, as you rightly highlight, when you're having to say yes to some people and no to other people, there's always going to be people disappointed and subject to criticism. I think what it comes down to is about processes, and for these processes to be as open and as transparent as possible, and to make sure that they're well understood. Any organisation in Creative Scotland's position is not going to make everyone happy, and indeed there can be cases when funding is given to certain projects can be quite controversial. I believe there was one a few years ago involving someone coming to live in Glasgow and to write about their experiences, and that engendered quite a very strong response from many people. But ultimately, projects like that, we have a duty to support the arts, and also for artists to have autonomy as well. I don't think it's for organisations to be seeking how to, government organisations to be, how would I put this, to be trying to shape the agenda of the arts, but rather to be supporting arts, to be supporting freedom of expression. And I think what is most important is to continue to work in improving the dialogue and understanding of decision-making processes. And I certainly hope that having a cross-party group, Music in the Scottish Parliament, where there is representation from Creative Scotland and other organisations as well, will help to open up and facilitate that dialogue.
To play devil's advocate, okay, you're a musician, you're that you write a song, and people either like the song or they don't, and if they like the song, they buy it, and you get money, and if they don't like the song, they don't buy it, and you don't like. Why should the state get involved in that? I mean, if you want to write a 2-hour folk jazz opera, you can do that, but if nobody wants to go see it, then
I suppose you're right. I'm not entirely sure.
Do you think?
I think there's and perhaps I might be out of touch with some music. I think there is a role, for the state to support our national performing companies and to support works that might otherwise not be successful. The reality is, much of what we regard as I suppose, constitutes Western civilization in terms of both in music and the wider arts. It was, either the church or rich patrons in days gone by who were able to support that. Now, we don't necessarily have that available to us now, and there's been many great works of art within music and beyond which were not appreciated in their time, which were scorned, and now are seen as canonical and standard works of the repertoire, and that applies as well to works even in the last kind of 50 years, in pop and music and rock and jazz, etc., which maybe weren't appreciated in their time. And I think there's also, when it comes to making judgments about what is worthy and what is not, I always think, I forget the chap's name, the head of Decca Records, who said, "No, Mr. Epstein, guitar groups are on the way out."
Yes.
So I think it's a dangerous game to play. I think there has to be sometimes an element of trust in allowing the artists themselves to pursue and to accept that this is not about having a return by the end of the financial year. It's a longer term investment, and do you know what, if it maybe takes 10 or 15 years before someone discovers an album or a folk jazz opera, that might become a piece that people then highly value, and it's for posterity. So it's an investment in culture, not just for the here and now, but for all time going forward.
Talking about investments in culture as well, if you're interested in Scottish music, Broadcasting Scotland has a new music show. Katee, you are hosting that show. Could you tell us a bit about it, Here and Now?
It's called Here and Now, yes. Basically, it just provides a platform for up-and-coming musicians to showcase their talent and have a chat about any exciting projects or gigs that are coming up. I feel that sometimes it's quite hard as a musician to have somewhere to talk about those things. So it just provides that platform for them.
How many shows have you done so far?
We done our first one last week.
How did that go?
It was good. It went really well. We had a singer-songwriter in called Erin Ponsonby. She done really well. She was a wee bit nervous to start off with, but then she eased in, and we're getting really good feedback about it.
Good.
And we've had some musicians get in contact with us once they've seen the show to ask how they get on the show.
And how do they get on the show?
Really, all you need to do is just drop me a message on Facebook.
Okay.
So it's Katee Kross. It's spelled Katee, Cross with a K, so that's Kross. Drop me a message, say that you want to be on the show, you want to showcase whatever you want to showcase, and we'll get you on. We're really, it's not like you have to be the best singer-songwriter, you have to have a Wembley gig coming up, you have to be really interesting. Just if you want to come on and you want to talk about what you're passionate about, then you come on and
Goes
talk
out
about
when?
It went out on Wednesday night, and it gets repeated on Friday and a Monday, I think.
Okay, plenty of opportunities to see it, and you can
Yes.
see it at podcastingscotland.scot.
Yes.
Okay. One of the things about music is, in terms of particularly something like Celtic Connections in Scotland, this kind of outward-looking approach to our colleagues abroad. Brexit, we need to mention Brexit every week, as I said earlier. Brexit threatens that approach, and next week there are some key decisions to be made and key votes taking place in the Scottish Labour Party conference. Do you think, you're not a Labour Party member, you're an SNP party member, obviously, but do you think we're getting any closer to seeing a coherent Labour Party policy on this in Scotland?
That's a very, very good question, and indeed Brexit does become a standing item on any agenda now for political conversations. One thing I would just say before that is you touched on music. I led a members' debate on Scottish Parliament a few months back on the impact that Brexit could have on musicians, and this is something that really is very significant. You mentioned Celtic Connections, and with the depreciation of the pound, that already impacted on their capacity to have artists coming in from North America to perform. But there's a whole range of other areas. There's lots of musicians in Scotland who might not necessarily be household names and playing, selling out, Wembley Arena or whatnot, but we do regularly go and play in Europe, and as an exchange there. If we move towards a situation where we're out with, for example, the customs union, then what it means is that musicians would be subject in terms of touring to carnets, which is being able to demonstrate that equipment you're taking into a country is to allow you to do a particular job there rather than to sell it. And there's estimates that this could have a cost of up to 2,000 euros per annum. Now, if you have an imposition of carnets for many tours, which barely break even if you're more low level, and you don't have an army of agents and lawyers etc. backing you up as the more established acts do, then this will put a lot of people off, and likewise it will put off a lot of acts coming to Scotland. So this issue of the customs union is incredibly important, as well as and again for the selling of merchandise, which is so important in generating profitability of tours. So there's these aspects, and there's all sorts of other potential implications with the digital single market, downloading etc. And given the fact that we don't know what the outcome is going to be, one has to almost be preparing for the worst, which could impact across a range of these areas. Now, looking at the actual political response, I certainly found when I led that debate there was a certain amount of ignorance, at least from one political party, not the Labour Party per se, but about the implications that Brexit could actually have for musicians. But I think what we're starting to see is that that there still isn't a coherent political response from either, I think, the Labour Party or the Conservative Party. Now, the Labour Party, I think, have announced today that Keir Starmer adumbrating Jeremy Corbyn's speech, which I believe is tomorrow, is that they don't want membership of the customs union, but they want a customs union. Okay. And I don't think there was any details provided. Again, that was just a story I read before we came on air. But again, this is sort of very vague. It's
well, Ian Murray, former Secretary of State for Scotland, Shadow Secretary of State, he wants a customs union. He wants to be in a customs union.
He wants membership of the customs union. As I understand his position, is arguing for membership of the customs union and membership, I believe, of the single market, which would effectively be equivalent to EEA membership, so what Norway has plus membership of the customs union, as I understand. Now that is a position
which is not what Richard Leonard wants, the leader of the Scottish Labour Party.
Which is not. And the thing is that when you start to explain Labour's position, or try to explain Labour's position, I start to feel like Sir Humphrey trying to explain to Hacker in one of these convoluted sentences at the end of it just leaves you utterly perplexed. I think fundamentally the Labour Party has been, at UK level, has been trying to ride two horses. They have in university towns, etc., in other areas where they were successful in the last general election in England, people who are clearly and overwhelmingly Remain, but they also have support from communities elsewhere, England, the north of England, which will strongly Leave, and so they don't want to pick a side, and they're trying to ride both. But we're actually coming now to a point where decisions are going to have to be made. We're only weeks away from being 1 year out until we actually leave. There has to be a deal agreed and ratified effectively by October to allow the individual state parliaments across Europe and some regional assemblies as well to ratify the agreement ahead, so that there isn't a crashing out on WTO rules. It's what would be the case if an agreement isn't struck. So the clock's ticking, the pressure's mounting. And what we've actually seen is a lot of kind of deadlines slipped. There were supposed to be amendments tabled, I think it was Clause 11. They weren't, we were promised that they would come forward. We've not been. We're not in a situation yet where the UK and Scottish governments have been able to come to an agreement. And the reality is that what we're now seeing is the UK government attacking the Scottish government today effectively, which is trying to suggest that the UK government's failure to secure Brexit, make Brexit a success and secure trade deals post-Brexit, it's all down to, the wicked SNP.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm sorry, that just doesn't cut the mustard. The UK government are the ones driving this. They're the ones driving this particular hard Brexit, and to date they've failed to come up with the answers. My view, and my view of my own party, is that it would be far better if we just abandoned this whole project altogether and remained within the European Union. But if we are leaving the European Union, then at the very least we must have membership of the single market and the customs union.
Although, if I was an SNP member negotiating with Parliament with Westminster, I would be worried about getting into a room with Theresa May in case she locks the door and brings out the Cluedo and you're not getting out until you reach some arrangement. Katee, do you, your generation, have been European since you were born?
Yes.
Are you feeling any great sense of loss as a result of the Brexit?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a very worrying time, mostly because there doesn't seem to be really any concrete proof of anything that's going to happen. It just seems like we're always going to be left in the dark until it's too late. And also, for a musician, I know quite a lot of people that have went to America to play, and it's been extremely hard with visas. A musical visa, a musician's visa, it costs a lot of money, extremely a lot of money, and that means quite a lot of people just go in with, a tourist visa, and then if you get caught, you get sent back home, and it's not something that you want to be doing. But is that going to be the same for going to Germany? Is it going to be the same going over to Ireland? How is this going to pan out?
Because you're not somebody who plays in Europe regularly, but you must have one eye on it, thinking, well, there's an opportunity for us that might be denied.
Definitely. October this year, hopefully, fingers crossed, everything goes to plan, we're going to be doing a support tour in Germany. So we're going to be touring the whole of Germany, which is a fantastic opportunity. But if we go the following year or the year after that, how is it going to pan out? Is it going to flop because there's not enough money for everyone to go? Is it going to be there's no support slot, so I don't get a chance to go? It's just it's extremely worrying, and it just feels like we're going to be left in the dark to the very end.
We've talked a bit about the Labour Party's problems there. Of course, the Tory Party's problems are no less daunting for Ruth Davidson, because she's facing a number of, in fact, more than half, I think, of Scottish Tory MPs are in favour of a harder Brexit than she would naturally incline towards.
Yeah, the baker's dozen of Scottish Tory MPs were going to be standing up, who were going to be under the personal instructions of Ruth and be standing up for Scottish interest. I think that particular illusion has well and truly been popped. The reality is we're seeing, I think it was 3 Tory MPs this week who joined a letter, I think it's the European Research Group, Jacobs Rees-Mogg's band of hard right Brexiteers signing a letter effectively demanding a hard Brexit, and I think it was an additional MP, I think it was Ross Thompson, tweeted his support of that. I may be wrong, but yeah, this is an absolutely ludicrous position, because MPs have been in the position of what MSPs are in, which will have had an opportunity to go and read some of the Brexit impact assessment papers. I saw them this week, and I'm not permitted to go and divulge the contents of it.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
No, I would.
Nobody will tell it.
No. And I think certainly if any MSP did that, it would just be used as an excuse by the UK government never to share information again. So with either the Scottish Parliament or perhaps even the Scottish Government.
How did that process take place? How much notice were you given?
Well, there was twofold. Initially, as I remember correctly, it was just before we stopped for a week's recess, and it was a Thursday afternoon, an email which was effectively, we've got some papers in Melville Crescent, the Scotland office, pop along and stay in if you want for a couple of hours. Some people may have already left Parliament early if they're heading back, heading north to constituencies or another business, and certainly for most people trying to find that time, between lunchtime and 5 o'clock to go and do it on a Thursday before recess when you're trying to get everything finished. It was completely impossible. My colleague, the SNP group convener, Bruce Crawford, wrote a letter outlining exactly what this was completely unacceptable. So what we eventually did have is in one of the rooms in the Scottish Parliament, the Donald Dewar room, it's a reading room in the Scottish Parliament, is we got an opportunity, but we had to book an appointment in advance, and then we had to go into the room and deposit our mobile phones and read, sign in and sign out, and read a set of instructions outlining exactly what we could and could not do. And we could take a pen and paper then to take some handwritten notes, but obviously we're not allowed to divulge. So it's terrible. It sends out entirely the wrong messages. But what I can say is I find it shocking that anyone who has read these papers and what they are forecasting and what we are suggesting could stand up and, like some latter day Dennis Norton, say it'll be all right on the night, don't worry. And that is what we have with these hard Brexiteers, and it's ultimately it's a completely delusional position, and they're willing to create a bonfire of all the kind of of the Good Friday Agreement, of trade, of the prosperity of future generations. They're willing to throw that in a fire just to go and heat their own petty form of kind of isolationist nationalism, which is ultimately what it is, and it's a tragedy. It really is, and I find it incredibly frustrating because we're in a position now where it's impossible even to engage in rational debate, because I think we're now with this the hard Brexiteers are producing their own papers, and this is beginning to the realm of alternative facts.
Right.
And then we're seeing, the final point I would make is everyone else has now been targeted and blamed. Judges, the Good Friday Agreement, Ireland, and now it's the SNP and the Scottish Government. Everyone apparently is to blame for Brexit being the chaotic situation it is, other than the architects of it themselves.
Do you find it hard, Katee, because I do, to try and keep interest in Brexit, because it moves quite slowly. It's starting to speed up now, but quite often it's quite infinitesimal changes in policy. And do you find that, and people you're talking, your generation, or people that you talk to, your friends, are they keeping abreast of this, or are they switching off?
Not really. I think quite a lot of people, especially young people, are switching off. I think because it's so hard as well to find out what exactly is happening, they're just saying, just forget about it, I'll just not even make interest on it. And it's a shame, because it's going to affect everyone, and especially as a younger generation, it's going to affect our generation for longer. Not saying that you're going to go anywhere anytime soon, but your generation, of course.
Yes, thank you.
But I think it should be made a bit easier to understand, and I do feel that I lose quite a bit of interest, and I feel bad about that, because I should be on the pulse about it, but it's just so hard.
It just feels like the tactics almost to sort of grind us down into submission, where we're so bored. But it's I think this is, we are in a situation right now because people are becoming, I think there's an element of fatigue amongst the general public on the matter, but this is an incredibly dangerous time. If these hard right Brexiteers get their way, the consequences will be paid not just by our generation, include us as we're roughly in the same age band, but for generations.
You two of you.
Thank you. But for generations to come, but also for existing generations, because one of the big areas we face is we need to grow our population in Scotland, and our health and social care sector is dependent upon migrants who come from other parts of the EU. If that's no longer possible, we are not going to be able to deliver the quality and standards of health and social care that we need when we see we do have an ageing population, and we need young people from other parts of Europe coming here to contribute. And it's just, you could spend hours upon hours upon hours going through sector by sector by sector in granular detail and it leaves you just, frankly, close to tears what the implications are from this.
Because I think for people that voted yes in 2014 and are waiting to see when there should be another referendum, many of them, I think, looked at Brexit as the trigger for something, and it's not proven to be so yet, probably because it's quite difficult to get locked into the facts. What would I mean? When do you expect things to really become more engaging?
I think that was because of the we're now approaching this sort of narrowing time frame as the need to pass the EU withdrawal bill. That date draws near, and the date for that ultimately for the UK's proposition to be submitted and agreed with the EU approaches in the autumn. I think we're now beginning a process of a quickening pace. Yes, there's obviously party conferences coming up, which is why there's been a bit of talk about manoeuvrings and changes of positions, but with Corbyn making a speech, with Theresa May, it's going to be difficult after that for them to roll back. There's not an opportunity between now and the autumn to go and have another U-turn or change of position. And I will be very surprised if either of these positions actually win the support of their own parties and are sustained going forward. And so I think it's when that starts to happen and we start to get a clearer picture emerging of what the UK's position is going to be, and then we can start to really say, not just speculate, but to say quite concretely what the consequences are going to be. Then for people across Scotland, they're going to have to begin to actually have to think about how this is going to impact upon their lives, their jobs, their businesses and the prospects for their children and generations to come. And I think that's the point that will start to materialise. To some extent it could be regarded as a phony war. Nothing's actually changed in the sense of...
Because Brexit hasn't happened.
In one respect, many other things have started to change, which are going to have an impact anyway. Businesses are deferring investment. Major financial institutions are looking at relocating their headquarters, be it to Dublin or Frankfurt or elsewhere. And there's a range of other key stakeholders in different sectors have already been impacted by this, and we've seen a huge fall in people coming already to the UK. I think there was a very significant drop in the number of nurses from other EU countries registering to work in the UK. So the impact has already been felt in key areas if you know where to look. But in terms of for people more generally, I think when it comes now, we're getting to this kind of key point, this crunch point, where something actually has to materialise. And that in itself, it won't be speculation anymore, it will be a reality, and it will be spelled out to people exactly what's going to happen. And it will then be, I think, for people in Scotland, to ask themselves, where do they see themselves? Do they see themselves in a sort of, do they want to be part of a thriving, internationalist, trade bloc in the EU, or do they want to be tethered to a kind of increasingly isolationist and marginalised Britain?
Well, we shall no doubt return to that issue in our show next week. We're all out of time today. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much to our guests. And Katie, I'd like to ask you to close the show with another one of your songs. Which song are you going to sing just now?
I'm going to do another one off of my second album. It's called Heather Mister.
We'll look forward to hearing it.